In my role as a solutions architect, I work with customers that are drawn to serverless because it enables them to kickstart their ideas into products quickly and provides flexibility to evolve them over time in response to their customers' feedback. Many customers that I speak with are interested in using serverless in their organization, but want to hear about other customers' journey to serverless for validation and to guide the development of their own path for serverless adoption. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Jillian McCann, the Head of Cloud Engineering and Artificial Intelligence at Workgrid Software. Jillian will share the journey of Workgrid Software from inception at Liberty Mutual through its evolution to a multi-tenant SaaS startup. She will provide her real-life experiences with serverless, warts and all, and give you practical recommendations to benefit serverless adoption in your organization. Following Jillian's presentation, please stick around for my interview with her to hear more about evolutionary architecture, the well-architected framework, and event-driven architecture. Please welcome Jillian McCann.
Thanks for the introduction, Sam, and for the opportunity to talk about Workgrid today. As Sam's mentioned, I am Jillian McCann, Head of Cloud Engineering and Artificial Intelligence at Workgrid Software. And prior to that, I've worked 20 years across Liberty Mutual in a wide range of systems and applications. In recent years, my focus has been twofold: how to bring serverless technology to the enterprise, and also how we can apply artificial intelligence to our everyday work lives to make it simpler and more productive. I'm really excited to be able to talk about our serverless journey, but first thing I need to highlight is that this is not just a technology story. This is a journey of many paths, and it all starts with that initial product and the problem that we were trying to solve for Liberty Mutual. Liberty Mutual is a Fortune 100 insurance company, which is headquarters in Boston with over 45,000 employees across the globe. Liberty Mutual is a people-first company, and in 2013, we started to explore how we could improve our digital employee experience. In essence, this was a reimagining of that experience and how we could put the employee at the very centre of that. And we developed this concept and launched an internal platform in 2015 that was continually added to and improved over time. The initial reaction and the direct employee feedback that we got, we just kept hearing one word over and over again, and that was love. I love this. And whoever says that about enterprise software? And we really believed in the potential of our product, and we felt it was something that we could help other enterprises with. So in 2017, we launched Workgrid Software. But what was the problem that Liberty and Workgrid are trying to solve? Well, let's take a look at the common enterprise ecosystem. We have many applications that we expect employees to use, and each of these applications do provide key functions and digitization of processes. But with the procurement of multiple best-of-breed systems for things like HR, the IT help desk, procurement, expenses, collaboration, and communication, for example, all it really means is we're adding to the complexity of the workplace and the cognitive burden of doing our daily work. And when we talk to employees about this complexity, these are the things that we heard. We're missing communications and emails. There's delayed approvals between managers and employees. Too many screens, too many steps, too much time wasted switching between systems. Hard to find the information that we need because it existed in silos. And ultimately, what we're delivering is a complex experience because each vendor provides a different experience from the other. And at Workgrid, we believe that the workplace is moving into a new era. Now, each era doesn't replace the previous one, it builds upon it and evolves. So the early internet was the foundation for what we have today, and the digital workplace has digitized our processes and tools. But in the intelligent workplace, this is where we really make sense of and streamline and connect those previous eras in a way that does simplify our employees' lives and provides that more seamless and enjoyable experience. Workgrid provides that single pane of glass, that one place to go, that will simplify the workday. In short, we manage the complexity so that the employees do not have to. The core components that we implemented at Liberty and have formed the basis of the initial product are smart notifications, and this is the aggregation of approvals, tasks, and contextual notifications across a multitude of systems. We provide micro apps or micro UIs that provide the aggregation of forms and transactions into a single experience. And we added a conversational interface in the form of a chatbot that provides quick access to information, help desk answers, and again, transactions for the digital workplace. Now, many discussions and late nights took place outside our normal working hours to build the business case and identify that initial product market fit, and to help build pitch decks and validate our concept with external companies. Liberty Mutual CIO James McLennan, he understood our product vision and goals, and in 2017 we were funded to proceed with a small team to launch Workgrid Software, a startup company built by the enterprise for the enterprise. So we've got our initial funding, we've gathered a small team together, and how do we move forward? What does that first day, that first year look like? Well, the founding Workgrid team consisted of 7 people, and I remember that meeting that first day with real excitement about what the future could bring. Our engineering team consisted of 4 people, including myself. Now, this was a team of engineers with many years combined experience across a multitude of enterprise applications, so we knew how to build complex, large-scale systems with quality and security built in. However, I was the only one with a more in-depth knowledge of AWS, as I'd worked as a cloud architect with our public cloud team. One thing we did agree very early on in that first week was that we'd be building and running Workgrid as a SaaS solution in AWS. Liberty Mutual at this time was several years into its cloud journey and had a growing and maturing ecosystem that we could leverage thanks to our Liberty Mutual CIO's James McLennan's vision and leadership. We could leverage those engineering practices put in place by that central team, so we weren't starting from scratch in AWS. So we knew AWS was going to be our cloud provider, but what were we trying to do and what services and capabilities would we leverage? In short, we really had to assess what we had to work with. The existing application was essentially a tale of 2 architectures, and how did we turn what we'd already proven in Liberty into a SaaS product? Our original core architecture was microservices built with Spring Boot and deployed on-prem to Pivotal Cloud Foundry, and we did leverage async processing using RabbitMQ and document database in the form of MongoDB. We had enhanced that product with additional features in the form of a serverless chatbot in early 2017, and this was one of the first production deployments of an end-to-end serverless application in Liberty Mutual. So these are the 2 architectures that we had to turn into product for our external customers. As you can imagine, this is where the debate started. But as a group, in that first week, we did discuss what we felt would be the key drivers in making some of those initial architecture choices. Speed. We need to move fast. We want to get the product into the marketplace so we can get some feedback, gain some traction, and ultimately, hopefully, customers to keep moving forward. And we need to keep the cost down. We want to make sure the initial funding will go as far as possible, so we could not afford to spend that time on non-differentiating things. And autonomy, we wanted to keep reliance on other internal teams to a minimum, so we could move as fast as possible and make decisions quickly. As much as possible, keep the end-to-end ownership of any decision within that core team. And we wanted to limit the need for procurement of external products or lengthy contract negotiations. We discussed the need for scalability, flexibility, and a quick time to release. So we knew we were going to be building in AWS, and we wanted to leverage as much out of the box as possible, but there really was some discussion on what that was. I was very much in the serverless camp, but really did not have the complete team buy-in at that point. And I really think rather than dictating solutions, it is so much better to bring the team along with you on any journey, especially this, as it was going to be a very long road. So we did what I refer to now as the compute experiment. So we took the time, we created the EC2s, the AMIs, configuring load balancers and auto-scaling policies, and we tried to deploy a service. And then we tried it with Lambda as our compute layer. So really it's an EC2 versus Lambda competition. And for us, it was a no-brainer. After one day, the general consensus was that we should give this a go. Now that's how I remember it, but I did find out recently from one of our lead engineers that they thought I was crazy at the time. Now, I just have to emphasize this, it's more than functions. And I'm sure everybody has heard that before, but really, I can't emphasize that enough. There's so many other choices that need to be made across key components as outlined in the slide. And when we think about those initial key drivers that I discussed earlier, We really aim to stay as far right as possible in that diagram, so the majority of operational responsibility lies with AWS. So what did those first application deploys look like? Well, they were very simple. We created a front-end React app on S3, and we started with what I call the big fat Lambda and the proxy API. Essentially, we wrapped a Node Express application in a Lambda, and this enabled the team to get up and running and deploy quickly. I did lose the DynamoDB discussion and we went with an Aurora, but again, it was a decision that the majority of the team felt comfortable with and felt could move fast with initially. In comparison today, we have over 300 Lambdas deployed with over 6 million invocations every day. And we use a wide range of both synchronous and event-driven patterns, but it did all start with that one big fat Lambda. And that's my advice, is to start simple and evolve. You can start with a small number of services using patterns that are already understood. I mean, the key message really is that you can start somewhere and iterate. The serverless ecosystem has evolved considerably since Workgrid started, and our engineering practice and product capabilities have evolved with it. You just need to make sure that you can move with it and take advantage as much as possible. And as we have grown, we have matured our architectural philosophy, which I've tried to condense into these points. Serverless first. I mean, as much as possible, we do try to leverage the serverless capabilities of AWS. We use managed services over managed infrastructure because we want to build business features and add value rather than run infrastructure. And we try to take a pragmatic approach. We architect what is right for right now. And this really recognises that sometimes we will make choices that we know we need to change in the longer term. And sometimes that tactical solution is the best solution at that given time. And we consider what is the simplest version of what we can build today. But this leads into evolving architecture and the ability to do the next right thing. I mean, it highlights that we're not afraid to throw code away. AWS releases new services and new service features constantly, so we need to assess these and remove code as necessary. And we're able to do that because of modular or Lego design, and we're not afraid to remove these pieces when the architecture is no longer fit for purpose. Security and operations is everyone's job. When you actually have a very small team, it's the responsibility of everyone. So Workgrid engineers deploy their own code and infrastructure, which makes them more cost aware. And also we like to encourage them to be industry aware and to be able to leverage the common patterns and architectural approaches that are shared by AWS practitioners. I mean, this is now an example of the services that Workgrid engineering uses in production today. And as you can see, we've evolved considerably from those early days. And we leverage services across messaging, storage, analytics, operations, security, compliance, and AI, to name a few. But you will notice that to date, we still have deployed Lambda as our compute layer. And this is what I consider the power of building on AWS. We have many building bricks to play with. We just need to be able to put them together to build something of value. But obviously, within that first year, we're not without growing pains and challenges. I mean, taking on the end-to-end ownership of building an external SaaS product, building a company, exploring the product market fit, and building engineering teams is not without its challenges. And I like to think we were challenging the enterprise thinking for what was possible with serverless. And that as we were building Workgrid, we've also forged a path in Liberty Mutual for those following behind. You know, we've showed the serverless can meet all the enterprise controls and compliance and security standards. And we've worked with those Liberty teams to enable new AWS services in the Liberty environment. And I'm pleased to say that we have been certified SOC 2 compliant this year. A major part of our technology journey was how do we change an application that served a single customer, Liberty Mutual, to serving many customers across the world. We needed to build a multi-tenant SaaS solution. To understand what this meant, we did deep research into SaaS architectures, and we leveraged many AWS resources such as white papers, the reInvent talks, and the AWS SaaS Factory. And when we looked at the upsides of cost, fault tolerance, deployment agility, and managed scale, it really made serverless computing a very attractive model for SaaS. There's no need for tenant-specific provision of compute services and allowed us to experiment with different tenant isolation models. In a SaaS, there does tend to be a higher reliance or need to focus on more operational aspects, and tenant management and monitoring definitely looks different. So as we evolved, we started to focus a small team of engineers on these SaaS operational aspects. In essence, we started to build serverless tools for our serverless architecture, and we focused on the automation of tools that would enable stability, security, and fast-track product development. We try to apply the service mindset to everything we do. Workgrid Mission Control is an example of that, and we built this to manage our tenants so we could have rapid onboarding of new tenants and be able to provision unique customer firewalls, domains, and certificates globally within minutes. But we built this using Amplify and AppSync and step functions, which provided a learning ground for those services before we actually added them to the core product. This mission control tool has evolved as product features have expanded and the number of accounts and regions that we manage have grown. Another area where we've applied service technology is Workgrid Sentinel. And Sentinel is designed to make our Workgrid platform more stable and remove some of the burden of resource configuration from developers. So by the observation of new resource creation across a range of services, we've reduced the burden of boilerplate resource configuration. So we have the automatic alarm configuration across multiple services. We have the automatic subscription of Lambdas to a centralized operational log solution. But again, this evolution concept, we didn't start with this tool. We started with CloudFormation and our CloudFormation cut and paste across multiple stacks, and it eventually evolved this more automated event-driven tool. Security is everyone's jobs, as I've mentioned, but also how can we use serverless to automate this? And we built Workgrid Tripwire, which is an event-driven security tool. And it follows upon the recommended patterns from the AWS well-architected security pillar. And we're alarmed on a multitude of predefined security events. And it builds upon this shared responsibility model between AWS, Liberty Mutual, and Workgrid. But we also layer on alarms that show anomalous activity for Workgrid. And my favourite is we even alarm for the creation of EC2 instances. So I've talked a bit about the technology journey, but this is also a people journey. How do we grow our engineering capabilities and how do we scale? I mean, currently we have 25 engineers across 5 teams. So how did we go from that initial 4 to 25, and how do we spread this service expertise and skills across the teams? I mean, realistically, you don't just hire 25 serverless cloud engineers. They don't really exist. So how do you evolve your existing engineers? Fortunately, Liberty Mutual has an amazing talented pool of people and a very supportive learning culture. So we're very privileged that we could leverage that talent pool to initially seed the teams with some more experienced cloud engineers. So we're able to embed them and we could leverage that expertise and experience as we started to bring in external hires. We wanted to encourage autonomy to make their own decisions and provide that learning collaborative environment. And our aim is that they can have an environment where it's safe to learn and experiment with the latest services and rapidly prototype and bring them into production. But because we have put the guardrails and a secure CI/CD pipeline in place, it enables our teams to go faster with confidence. Education is key. Take the time to educate yourself, but also allow your teams the time to educate themselves, but leverage the resources. The AWS white papers, the certifications, the meetups, the conferences. Reach out to the developer advocates, the account managers, AWS heroes. The amount of information that's available is immense. And these are freely available. In a serverless and serviceful world, 2 weeks of research, learning and experimentation is much better than 2 months of coding. And providing sandbox dev environments that are safe for experimentation and learning are really key. We also look at the well-architected framework and tool that really has started to help our teams align on good architectural practices. I included this slide because in previous conferences, I'm quite passionate and enthusiastic about serverless technology. But I think that gets mistaken sometimes as if I'm saying it's easy. I never once said it was easier, but I do think it's better. I mean, for once, we really have teams that have full end-to-end understanding of what it takes to deliver that product to production. That ownership of the perimeter security, network, disaster recovery and backup, as well as core product features, has meant like our stack has just got a whole lot bigger. And it can be a steep learning curve, but it has many rewards. And to be honest, it is hard to compare what it would have looked like if we hadn't leveraged serverless and Workgrid. So the best I can do is say, if you ask me would I do it again, it'd be yes. When we talk about product evolution, what is the next right thing? So if our engineers are not focusing on servers, scaling and infrastructure, what are they doing? Well, in Workgrid, they're helping to evolve our product. They're working with product managers and designers. They're working with our customer success teams. They're learning about new AWS services and features. They're working on the reduction of operational burden and the optimization of the cost of our ecosystem. They're helping us achieve SOC 2 compliance. And they're improving the automation tooling to reduce our RPOs and our RTOs for disaster recovery. And it doesn't stop. So we need to keep evolving based on the emerging customer needs and technology advancements. And we do that. So some examples of how we've been able to, move at speed have been when DynamoDB On Demand was released in November 2018. The team had investigated it, coded changes, tested it out, and turned it on in production the very next day. And we were also able to leverage partnerships with AWS and be involved in things like the pre-release of AWS Kendra. And we're also able to assess new services as they come out. And we're currently discussing how we could leverage EventBridge and AppFlow, for example. But rather than just taking my word for it, I wanted to let Workgrid engineers have the last say. So when I asked the question to them, what stands out about serverless, these are some of the things that I heard. Having an inherently scalable architecture by default by using serverless services. Our ability to scale is pretty low on our list of concerns. That's a huge thing. Speed of prototyping. We learn fast as opposed to fail fast by standing up services and quickly evaluating them. No procurement or engaging with other infrastructure teams to assist. Improved engineering. We use Lambda to encourage a mindset of designing something to do one thing. These, I think, capture the essence of why serverless and AWS has proved a great match for Workgrid. And from all of us at Workgrid, thank you for listening to our story. And hopefully our journey is only just getting started. And now Sam and I are going to have a brief Q&A session where we discuss some of the points that I raised during my talk.
Hi, Jillian. Thanks so much for your presentation on serverless adoption at Workgrid Software, and thanks for sticking around for a couple of questions. I like that you called out pragmatic and evolutionary architectures in your architecture philosophy. In your experience, how does serverless enable the adoption of pragmatic architectures?
Well, Sam, to me, pragmatic architecture is all about making practical choices and making choices that work for that point in time to help you meet your end goals. But the main point with serverless is that the cost of change is lower, so you can make quick practical decisions safer in the knowledge that you can change your mind later. And as I said, really do try to build the simplest version of what you need at that point in time. And as your knowledge and experience of service architecture grows, and as your understanding of the service capabilities evolve, you can more easily re-architect to take advantage of these new features and capabilities.
I was an AWS customer before joining Amazon as a solutions architect, and your recommendations for absorbing the AWS pace of innovation match my experience as well. How do you approach architecture design with evolution in mind, and what strategies do you use for replacing application components over time?
In my experience, an event-driven architecture does make it easier to replace components over time. You can build and test out new components in parallel with the existing architecture, which makes it easier to make those changes more incrementally. Now, we have evolved a distributed architecture with loosely coupled services, and this allows the adoption of new services and a change in design because the impact is limited to that one service. So it's really that Lego concept that we talked about. You take out the yellow brick and you replace it with the red and the blue. But one point mentioned is the principles of software architecture do not change. Importantly, keep it simple, don't over-engineer it, and always have tests so you can constantly make changes without impacting functionality. The continuous new offerings and pace of change can be a distraction, but we manage this by having a repeatable process for evaluating new services and bringing them into the product.
You called out the challenge of combining the on-premise architecture using Spring Boot and RabbitMQ with a conversational chatbot using AWS Managed Services. Can you talk more about the approach used to merge these two application stacks?
Well, as you can imagine, we took a pragmatic approach in how we adopted the serverless technology across that new application that we built. And we did begin with that single database and that one single Lambda, that big fat Lambda that I talked about previously. And basically, this is a monolith. But as the team's understanding of how to build a multi-tenant SaaS solution and their knowledge of the underlying AWS services matured, we began to decompose this initial monolith along domain boundaries. And we then approached each component in a more well-defined service mindset, which meant using core technologies like SNS, SQS, Lambda, Kinesis, DynamoDB, for example. But there is a potential for a lot of sprawl in a service architecture. Your system can grow quickly from dozens to hundreds, potentially thousands of Lambdas very easily. But I do think a key component in success is consistency in some of the architecture approaches that you take. If you use repeatable patterns across your system, it's much easier for engineers to pick these up and understand them. But also, if you're using repeatable architectural patterns, then it makes it much easier to codify these and really automate best practices and guardrails for them.
Several times you mentioned the use of event-driven architecture at Workgrid Software. How do you use event-driven architecture at Workgrid, and how do you find that the AWS serverless services help manage their complexity?
Well, serverless services by their nature really do promote the adoption of event-driven architecture, and we've used it across all areas of Workgrid's product and core platform. The core tenet of event-driven architecture is the asynchronous interaction between components, and using services such as SNS and SQS, Kinesis and Lambda in conjunction with that single responsibility principle really has made this easier to achieve. And we have the ability to replay events by using dead letter queues, and this has resulted in real resiliency benefits. When there has been service outages, we've not resulted in any loss of data because we've been able to replay the events that have queued up. Now, there's always going to be a measure of complexity that you cannot avoid with an event-driven architecture, and the challenge is to keep this as simple as possible. And that means, as I said before, the use of tried and tested patterns with a focus on observability across the platform. And you want to keep that operational burden as low as possible for your teams.
You noted that security, operations, and cost are everyone's responsibility with a serverless application. Can you talk more about the evolution of your internal tools like Mission Control in order to support engineering and operations best practices?
Well, before Sentinel had a cool name, it was simply a service that created alarms on the creation of a Lambda. And we were able to determine this by CloudTrail and CloudWatch. We started to see how powerful that concept could be, and we expanded to cover other common services that our teams use. And it really did help lower that ops for the developer, but importantly, it provides consistency across our alarming and monitoring ecosystem. And it's now responsible for configuring log streams, storage backups, applying CloudWatch retention, as well as the creation of those multitude of alarms for different services. The other example, Mission Control, and it came about from our customer success team's needs to quickly onboard customers. It started off as a deployment pipeline using CloudFormation and required a developer to initiate the process. But we brought that into a console and named it Mission Control, and that has now become the control plane for a number of operational areas such as backup recovery, global alarm configuration, WAF management, and soon feature flag. And this has really helped empower our customer-facing teams so they can self-service operational capabilities and remain focused on delivering customer outcomes.
I noticed that you included the well-architected console in the list of AWS services used at Workgrid Software. How do you integrate the well-architected framework into product development and operational excellence?
Well, we've always used the well-architected framework, the white papers to understand best practice across many different aspects of AWS. But in recent times, we've used the well-architected review tool that's part of the console to incorporate it into development cycles for architecture significant pieces of work. And our intention is to carry out the review of the relevant pillars when work is nearing completion. And we take these outcomes and improvement plans and we assess them with engineering leadership so we can get a view of how to improve our architectural standing as we go forward.
Jillian, thanks so much for giving us an inside look into Workgrid's serverless journey. I'm looking forward to learning from stories like yours throughout the event.